Hello and thank you for joining me. I'm delighted to be joined again by Tracy and Jonathan from STANLIB. Thank you both of you for joining me today.
Thanks,
so to start with, Tracy, let's start with you. Why don't you tell me exactly who STANLIB is and what it is that you're doing?
Thanks, Matt. No, super to be here. I really appreciate the opportunity. Thank you. So STANLIB is actually owned by the Standard Bank Group, which is the largest bank on the African continent. And in itself, STANLIB is the top third largest asset manager in the country. We manage about 600 billion rands worth of assets across a diverse product range. And probably one of our focal products is what we have to speak about today, the Pan-Africa Debt Fund, which is one of our specialist investment teams within STANLIB. I think probably something that our scale gives us and why that's so important is that we've got boots on the ground, which I think is vital if you want to look at an investment on the continent. So Standard Bank is in just about every important African country, which gives us really on the ground understanding of what's going on.
So why this focus on Pan-Africa? Jonathan, maybe I can direct this question to you. What led you guys to be focusing on this in particular?
Yeah, so these are a series of asset classes that we've been focused on for a number of years for many clients, and so over the last few years we've been pulling together this offering to effectively combine our capabilities across both African Eurobonds and African unlisted credit, and to package those in a way that we think makes sense for our client base. In terms of the continent itself, Africa is obviously a very high growth environment, and that in itself offers or brings a lot of investment opportunities to us. It gives us a wide range of options that we can look at. In terms of the yield on African Eurobonds, African sovereign Eurobonds are one of the highest yielding instruments globally, even when you compare it with emerging market debt, emerging market equities. It's still up there at the top and has been for many years in terms of the hard currency yield it can offer investors, which in today's environment where investors are always increasingly looking for yield, we think it's a very exciting opportunity for investors.
Well, it's funny you bring up investors. We're speaking at Unite Dubai in the UAE. So as a UAE investor or a GCC investor, how would one go about getting involved and incorporate exposure to Pan-Africa debt within their portfolio? Tracy, maybe you want to kick us off on this one?
So what we've done, as Jonathan said, is we've actually packaged our capability within a fund. So it really, in terms of portfolio construction, asset allocation, downside risk management, etc., that's all done by our investment team. And it really just allows investors sort of a one-stop to access the continent. To have Jonathan's expertise and skills, experience, having walked that continent, in a fund like that, as opposed to trying to access individual opportunities themselves, just, I guess, to us makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, and I think just to add on to that, Matt, I think that many investors, including those here, will already have or may already have some exposure to Africa through perhaps investing into an emerging market fund, and the challenge there in sort of lumping Africa with the rest of emerging markets globally is that the higher yield that you can obtain through investing into Africa gets diluted by the rest of the emerging market universe. So we think that by providing a fund run by people who are on the ground in Africa with a specific focus on Africa, you can actually capture and harness that yield and earn an enhanced return rather than looking at a much lower, broader emerging market return.
Increased returns also do come with increased risk. So perhaps I think it's only fair to ask, how does STANLIB manage the risks associated with the fund?
Risks associated with investing into African Eurobonds, they're really very similar to investing into other fixed income asset classes. What you have layered onto that is really the frontier nature of the markets that that we're active in. And that obviously brings another dimension of risk. I guess you've got enhanced country risk and specific country risk too, because I think often Africa tends to be lumped together as a continent. The reality is that you have many different countries with many different drivers, different levels of political maturity, different makeups to their economies. Some may be import dependent, some may be big exporters. So you really have to drill down into the fundamentals of each country. We have a very thorough investment process where we do go into all of those risks. And then I guess going back to what Tracy was saying about being part of a bigger group, being part of Standard Bank, who are the biggest bank by assets on the continent, that gives us a lot of access to on-the-ground intelligence in country. So when we're assessing the instrument of a particular country to invest into, we can literally pick up the phone, speak to the individuals on the ground within Standard Bank and other institutions. We talk to a lot of institutions every day and really pick up that on-the-ground intelligence. And then we supplement that with a lot of in-country visits. Obviously, over the last couple of years, it's been very difficult because of COVID. But prior to that, and now that the world is opening up again, we're always on the plane, pounding the streets, speaking to governments, speaking to corporates, speaking to entities operating in country, to multilaterals, and really building up a picture from the ground up as to exactly what's happening in those economies.
Tracy, maybe you could help me out for this on the flip side then. What are the benefits for these countries involved whilst you're pounding their pavements?
Matt, critical question. So, to bring capital to these countries is vital for growth, for infrastructure, for development in the country. And you'll have a look at our pipeline of investments. There's a lot of that infrastructure, like impactful investment that can really change sort of the path of countries. So critical to bring investment to the continent. Everyone's obviously aware there are gaps on the continent. So to be able to plug those with investments from either South Africa or globally, makes a very, very big difference.
So to turn this question slightly to somewhere else in particular, sustainability. Increasingly at the heart of investors, where they're putting their investments, they put sustainability in the forefront. How is STANLIB helping? Where's sustainability specifically in the Pan-Africa Debt Fund? Where are the ESG principles? How have you incorporated them? Tracy, maybe you could kick us off here.
Thanks, Matt. So surprisingly, for an emerging market, South Africa is actually very developed and very plugged into ESG investments, or the subject of ESG. So STANLIB, being, I guess, the size we are, has a very developed ESG framework within which our investment teams operate and look at. So it's really core to all of our investment decision making are those three variables. And I think you really do see the S part of ESG come to life in the Pan-Africa Debt Fund. So maybe, Jonathan, you can touch on that, your specific ideas around governance, specifically on the continent.
Yeah, absolutely.
And then the S part.
Absolutely. And I think, governance is obviously key, and particularly, again, we talked earlier, Matt, about the fact that these are largely frontier markets that we're looking at. And again, the fact that the governments and the sort of political framework within each country is at a different stage of development. So that is a huge focus for us. Ensuring that when we invest into an instrument, that the purpose for which that instrument was initially issued is something which is being adhered to. That when we sort of go down into the corporates, because this fund will not only invest into sovereign Eurobonds, it will in time invest into African corporate credit, both listed and unlisted. And there again, we look at what is the purpose of that funding. If it's going into a power-related project, for example, what are the environmental considerations there? Has a full impact assessment taken place? What are the effects on the local community? So that brings in the social piece. So yeah, it is a fundamental piece of our analysis. As Tracy says, that the framework forms part of our core decision-making process and feeds into the ultimate investment decision.
Okay. And final question, we are speaking here at Unite Dubai, so I think it's only fair to ask, more Middle Eastern and African investors uniting together, collaborating, what kind of advantages are we going to see for Africa and for the Middle East as well?
So, I mean, if you look at South African investors are very much familiar with the continent and already investing in Africa. To be able to tap into another pool of liquidity and to bring that to the continent would be an incredible success story. As I said earlier, you know, there's a lot to be done on the continent. To be able to bring capital here and to provide very attractive risk-adjusted returns to Middle East investors could be a success story for everyone.
And Jonathan, final thoughts from yourself?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's spot on. I think that yeah, again, as Tracy has said, Africa needs capital. I think that you know, some IMF numbers where there was a shortage of about $90 billion a year on the continent. You know, we need to harness that capital from wherever we can globally to help Africa develop and to grow.
Great, thank you. Jonathan, Tracy, thank you for joining me, and I look forward to Unite Dubai later this evening. Thank you.
Thank you, Matt.
Thanks, Matt. Appreciate it.
Thank you.